There we go. Wonderful. Well, welcome again, everyone. My name is Saralyn Smith. I am currently the Interim Director for the Professional Development Center housed at UW-Tacoma. And I also have the pleasure of being the manager or director of the Washington Certified Public Manager program run out of our office. I'm really glad that you're here today. I really love this program. I have the pleasure of overseeing the program's curriculum, recruiting and advising students, and working with all of our excellent instructors in the program. It's very near and dear to my heart, and so I love being able to share it with folks. What we're going to do today in this short time together is I'll share a little bit about the program's content with you, how we run the program here in Washington, and stories from past and current cohorts. I'd like to start off with a land acknowledgement that is adapted from the rather lengthy UW-T School of Education land acknowledgement statement, which we've kind of adopted as the campus's land acknowledgement. And I do this because, number one, it's something that I do think is very important in general, especially here in Washington State, that we really acknowledge and grapple with the history here and the present here of Native and non-Native interactions, the systems we have in place, and the harm that has been done and continues to be done by non-Native folks to Indigenous communities. And beyond that, for the Certified Public Manager program, since we are talking about official power structures, I think it becomes even more important. So the community here at UW-Tacoma acknowledges that we learn, live, reflect, and teach on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people. As our campus is specifically situated on the traditional homeland of the Puyallup Tribe of Indians, we will make intentional efforts to create inclusive and respectful partnerships that honor our Indigenous neighbors, the histories of dispossession and forced removal that allowed for the growth of this institution, and our need to build true partnerships and community. So thank you very much for letting me hold that space. Now, as we talk about the Certified Public Manager program, I'm going to start with one of my favorite student stories because I think it really showcases the value of the program in a couple of different ways. So this quote on the screen is from Denise Matayoshi Mino, who went through the CPM program in 2018-19. Denise had an entire career in IT at the state level, but found herself unemployed before starting our program. Despite this, she invested in herself and in her development. She was inspired through the program to take an internship at the state level, and then was hired as a leadership development specialist by Lucky Eagle Casino, something that she credits, at least in part, to the value of our program, both in terms of how she talks about herself and in having that on her resume. The job title is actually out of date. I need to update this image. She is currently, she leads development programs in HR for the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation. She is also now a certified leadership coach. She is working on her master's degree, focusing on creating pathways for minoritized and marginalized professionals, in particular women. And she has been teaching in the program now, as well as in our leadership development certificate. So she is a wonderful person, and she really speaks beautifully to the value of the program. So what is this program? What is the Certified Public Manager? So the CPM, as I'll refer to it for the rest of this presentation, is a national designation. And technically, though, it's international because there is a program in the U.S. Virgin Islands and one in the Netherlands, and Jamaica, I believe, has just applied to start a program of their own. The CPM programs are all governed by a body called the National Certified Public Manager Consortium. And you can kind of think of that like a project management institute or Society for Human Resources Development, in that their goal is to prepare managers for excellence in careers in federal, state, and local government and other organizations with what they call a public purpose. Much like those other groups that I mentioned, what they do is they set the standards for all of the CPM programs. They review and accredit them, and they maintain the list of core competencies upon which all of the programs are founded. Then beyond that, these programs really kind of determine how they're going to meet those competencies and what makes the most sense for their region, for their local population. The consortium allows one program per what they call a jurisdiction, which is typically a state. And so the Washington Certified Public Manager program here at UW-Tacoma is actually the only CPM program in the state of Washington. Yes, so the flip side to the consortium is the American Academy of Certified Public Managers, and they are a professional association that anyone who earns a CPM can join. They offer a growing number of continuing educational opportunities, scholarships, awards, as well as online opportunities for networking with other public managers across the entire country. Now, I mentioned a minute ago the core competencies that the CPM is built on, and let's dig into that here. So all programs are built upon the same competencies as defined by the consortium. We approach them a little bit differently. And these competencies have the dual role of, or dual purpose of improving individual performance of public managers and improving the effectiveness of their organizations. And one of the things that I really love about the CPM and the way it's structured is that context is central. So this is not just about generic leadership development or organization development. It's about using each of those to further the other with the ultimate goal of solving actual problems in public sector organizations and improving the services they provide to the community. And I'll get to how we approach these competencies in just a minute. But I also want to call out that our program in particular recognizes that there needs to be an equity lens across the entire program. So there isn't a single one of these competencies that I'll talk about in a moment that doesn't or shouldn't relate to equity and inclusion in some way. So we still have a long way to go on this in our program, but over the last couple of years, we've been really systematically looking at how can we make sure that we are integrating this equity lens rather than just having, say, a 2-day cultural competencies workshop at some point in the program. All right, competencies. So I like to start with the competency of developing self because that's where our program starts. This competency is about demonstrating a commitment to continuous learning, self-awareness, and individual performance planning through feedback, study, and analysis. Leading people has to do with articulating vision in a clear and inspiring way, promoting diversity, fostering commitment and team spirit, as well as effectively managing our impulses and emotions. Managing work is a lot of the day-to-day stuff, right, of managing. Clear delegation and expectation setting, motivating, coaching, and providing feedback, monitoring, measuring, and addressing performance, and using effective planning, prioritization, and organization to meet organizational goals. Change leadership is fairly self-explanatory, but I do really like that the CPM competencies include fostering creativity, innovation, and proactiveness within that change leadership competency area. The next one is key, and it goes back to what I said about context being important. Systemic integration means approaching planning, decision-making, and implementation from an enterprise level perspective, right? Not just what impacts you or your team. And this is something that can be counterintuitive for people because when I say enterprise level, I don't mean you're in charge of everything. What I mean is taking a systems view, right? Beyond just our own little bubble of what we do. And we can do that at any level within an organization. Personal and organizational integrity, as you might expect, has to do with ethics, conflicts of interest, and legal and policy compliance, navigating those effectively. And then those are all tied together with a final competency of public service focus, which really runs through all of the content and other competencies, which is why I have it at the center of this wheel here, right, where everything's connected. One of our instructors said to me early on when I started working in the program that you can't really take yourself, your leadership style, your personality out when you create policy and do other work. And I just really loved that because it's a very succinct way to talk about how all of those things are tied together. And that's something we really try to showcase in our program and help people really integrate into the way they work. Now, here in Washington, we're going to talk a little bit about how we really implement and attack those competencies here in Washington. But I want to start by talking a little bit about the students we've had in our last two cohorts since we really kind of revamped the program. So the participants in our program, as you can see, come from a range of different type of institutions, organizations, from small cities like Algona to higher ed institutions like Highline and Renton Technical College, Parks and Rec, public utilities. We have a group of 3 folks from City of Tacoma this year, 2 of whom are from Tacoma Public Utilities, as well as some state agencies and other kind of more administrative functions. The folks who've done the program in the last couple of years have ranged from executive assistants who are really tasked in their particular organization with some cross-functional leadership in a number of ways, or project management, all the way up to directors and assistant directors of their agencies or organizations. It makes for a very rich classroom experience in that you have people from different areas talking about how they address or struggle with similar things, right? So it really opens up kind of that sphere of awareness. Historically, most of our participants have come from the I-5 corridor, Western Washington. I am really trying to open this up statewide though. So I'm hoping we'll get some more pins on that eastern side of the state map as we go along. The students all have different goals when they come to the program, but the through line is that they recognize that their growth and development as a leader is directly connected to the success of their team, their agency or organization, and our communities. So here are a few specific goals that students have expressed in their learning plans, which is an activity, an assignment we have them do early on in the program. So I've paraphrased these from the last couple of years. So goals: to improve my presence as a leader, to broaden their scope of awareness, which is something I hear in testimonials from the program pretty frequently, that past students really value being able to share their increased knowledge and awareness with their own teams, since that larger picture, that enterprise level perspective, is often not communicated frequently to folks who are in more frontline or quote unquote lower level positions in our organizations and agencies. To become more promotable and professional in a variety of different ways, to network and expand their contacts within the state, which again can be harder to do when you are not kind of on the upper ranks of an agency and organization. To lead with an understanding of what motivates my employees. This was a lovely one from one of our more experienced participants last year, that he was really looking at being able to make that connection and improve his leadership style accordingly. And then this year, we actually have multiple people who are doing the program as kind of a testing ground for other higher education that they're looking to pursue. So we have 2 folks who are looking at doing an MPA, a Master's in Public Administration, within the next couple of years. One who is hoping to get their city administrator credential certification, and they saw the CPM as a way to gain some really immediately actionable leadership and management skills and test the waters to see if they're ready to kind of go back, because it is a fairly intensive program, but it isn't a graduate degree program, right? So the stakes are a little bit different. So I really liked that goal this year. Now, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty. How does this program actually work in Washington State? The program, the content and the format of the program are pretty closely tied together, the way that we approach the program. But I'm going to start with our content. Now, our content weaves those 7 competencies that I discussed through 5 modules. And the names of these modules are going to change slightly next year, but the progression I'm going to describe is still going to be the same. We structured this explicitly with the idea of expanding concentric circles. So each one of the courses in the program expands on it. It builds on those that came before it and expands the circle of influence or consideration. So in the first module, participants start by looking inward, their own personality, values, and identity, and explore personal leadership styles before moving on to kind of look at the systems in which public service leadership functions, like the history and structure of governmental bodies and human resources management. And then we move out to looking at things like coaching, facilitation, feedback, conflict management, and other skills necessary for leading groups and individuals, out to the larger functioning of public sector organizations, and then finally to lead what we call right now leading in a political and societal system. As I mentioned previously, each of these modules integrates an equity component, and it's done with that same idea. So in leading self, we start by looking at, well, what is identity? How do my identities, how do they show up? How do they influence who I am and how I show up in the world? Then we move out and look at kind of some of the more historical considerations in our state. We look at managing diverse teams, et cetera, right? So again, that idea of building a strong foundation personally and then expanding out. In terms of the format of the program, we really take kind of a multi-pronged approach here. So we deliver the course content, in 2 kind of major ways. So one is through the delivery of the content in a hybrid format. And then there are 2 major applied projects in the program that we use to gauge competency and for people to really put those skills into practice and get some feedback on them. So when I say hybrid here, I mean it in all the ways you're probably thinking. So we have a select number of days participants attend class on site at UW-Tacoma. We try to schedule these so they fall on topics that will most benefit from you being here in person. So for example, the first day and a half of the program is in person so that people can meet each other in the real world, make that connection, get to know each other a little bit before then we launch into the real online portion of the program. We spread those out through the year though, so that it really with the goal of reducing the burden of coming to campus. So this year it was August, January, mid-April, and then it'll be our last class session and capstone presentations in July. Expected to be roughly the same next year. The rest of the content is delivered online in a couple of different ways. One is through live online classes through Zoom. We usually do those in half-day sessions, so 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. on a Thursday and a Friday, every other week. So you'll have class Thursday and Friday one week, no classes the next week, and repeats on. And again, this is so that there isn't that burden of coming every single week, but you still have enough time that you're able to really sit with the content in a meaningful way. And then between those online live class sessions, there's asynchronous work, which here just means work you do on your own time and pace, guided by assignment deadlines. So that includes readings, videos, activities, discussion boards, journals, and some other types of activities depending on the content. The amount of this content really varies depending on where you are in the program, but an average of about 3 to 6 hours per week seems to be accurate from my conversations with the students. Then there are those two major applied projects that I mentioned. The first one is the Personal Leadership Project, and that's completed in the first 2 modules of the program, and it's a relatively small project. It's an opportunity to take something you've learned, so we give a few options to get people started, and really apply it in a low stakes way in your workplace, and then reflect on it. Because that reflection, that metacognition, that feedback piece is really important to the way we do our program. And that's because it's really the way that adults in particular concretize, really make information stick in their brain. And so the Personal Leadership Project is the first kind of a little bit larger way that we ask people to engage in that. And then the Process Improvement Capstone. So every certified public manager candidate has to do a capstone project as part of the requirements from the consortium. Because Washington State has a really long history with process and quality improvement as state government initiatives in particular, we chose to structure our capstone on a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt process improvement capstone. Participants over the course of the program will select and complete a process improvement project within their organization, and then prepare a portfolio and a public presentation detailing the project, how it demonstrates their mastery of the CPM competencies. There are 2 major benefits to us doing it this way. One is that kind of the whole point of process improvement is improving something, right? Having a tangible impact. And so it's a great way for a participant and an agency to show the value, right, of going through the program. The other reason is that it allows us to issue a second qualification at the end of our program, the Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. And that's fairly unique within the consortium. I think we're one of maybe 2 programs that does that. And it's especially unique now because UW-Tacoma won't be offering the Green Belt anymore in our normal 40-hour format. It will just be the 6-month-long certificate program out of Continuum College. So again, it's a really unique opportunity there for that with that integration. Okay, we are heading into the home stretch now. I'm going to do some details about the program, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. And details, I mean, we're going to get into some things that are already on the website for the most part, but I find people learn differently and process information differently, so it's helpful to go through them again here. So 3 areas I want to touch on. The first is the application deadline, which is July 10th. I do encourage you to apply earlier if you are interested in the program. The Professional Development Center is what is referred to as a self-supporting unit. And so what that means is that everything we do here is funded through the programming that we run. And we cannot run programs unless we have a critical mass of participants in them. So it really helps on our side if you apply earlier than July 10th so that we can get a gauge on our cohort size for the year. But July 10 is that drop dead application deadline. I'm still firming up next year's schedule, but I believe we will start on August 15th, the online work. Excuse me, with the first in-person class sessions. I believe it's the 25th and 26th, or the 24th and 25th of August, and then end in July 2024, similar to this year's dates. The total cost of the program is $6,000, which can be paid upfront at the beginning, or can be broken into up to 5 payments with a deposit at the beginning of the program. And that option is available whether you are paying out of pocket or your organization is paying. Speaking of which, we do not offer any scholarships or financial aid for this program, but we do work very frequently with employers who are sponsoring all or part of of a participant, so we're well versed in that. And then there are a few discounts that we are able to still offer this year. I don't know if we will be able to offer them after this year. So those discounts are for UW alumni, UW staff and faculty, and for groups of 3 or more participants from the same agency or organization. So if you are interested in any of those, or any of those seem like they apply to you, please let me know and we can talk about the details. All right. Okay, last bit. I have convinced you to join the program. Wonderful. What are your next steps? So the first thing that you'll want to do is clean up your resume and make sure that you meet the minimum eligibility requirements for the program. We set these minimum eligibility requirements primarily so that we can make sure that people who are joining the program are going to be able to get what they are supposed to get out of it, right? We are not interested in having folks join the program and then not be able to use the skills, not have enough prior experience to be able to kind of put what we're talking about into a context, or not be able to contribute to the classroom conversation, right? So keep that in mind as I go through these minimum eligibility requirements. So first is that you be currently in a management or leadership position with a public agency or organization. I would also potentially extend that to nonprofit organizations, depending on the type of work being done. And this is primarily, again, with that idea of we're going to talk about team stuff. We're going to talk about organizational stuff. And we want to make sure people are in positions where that makes sense. We define management and leadership fairly broadly. So, you may have the title of manager and not have any direct reports. That's fine with us because usually those folks are working on cross-functional teams, or they lead projects or different things like that, right? You may have a position that doesn't say manager or leader in it, but you have direct reports. So there's a variety of different ways you can meet that requirement. We require that people have at least 3 years of work experience total, at least 1 year in a public organization, right? Or an organization that is deeply engaged with the public sector. And those are really it. We don't have any education requirements anymore. So those are really the 2 main things. Once you've confirmed that, the second step I recommend is that people explore financial support options with their employer, whether or not they think there is any money available. One of the things I've learned from the last 12 years I've been working in continuing education is that there are often pockets of money or funding sources or partnerships that employees have no idea exist until they ask. So the worst thing that can happen is they say no. But I would encourage you to explore that, in particular because I know in the public sector, approval processes for funding can take a while, which is why I encourage people to do that as they're preparing their application instead of just after they've applied, right? Select someone to write your letter of recommendation and talk with them a little bit about why you want to do the program. Share the website with them. The letter of recommendation is really brief. It is a small ask of folks, really just to kind of tell us a little bit about, who you are and why you're a good fit for this program, why it makes sense for you. You'll see the requirements for that on our the website. And an important thing to note here too is it doesn't have to be from your current supervisor. This is not a letter of approval that you can participate in our program. It really is one of the ways to kind of help us, again, see, is this the right program for you at the right time, right? Write or record your candidate statement, which again is fairly brief, 1 or 2 written pages or a 3 to 5 minute video or audio statement. And it's again with that same idea. So you're going to talk a little bit, there's some questions for you to answer on the website, and talk a little bit about why you're interested in the program, how you meet those requirements, if there's anything kind of questionable about it, and what you hope to gain. So once you have that all together, your resume, letter of recommendation, if they provide it to you directly, or at least a recommender who's going to has agreed that they will send a letter to us, you'll submit your application online. It's just a web form. You do not have to apply to the university, and there's no cost to apply. So you'll just submit your documents. Depending on the time of year, it could take me anywhere from 3 to 10 business days to review your application, reach out to you if I have any questions. And then once you're approved, then it's just about us figuring out getting you registered and figuring out how it is you're going to pay for the program.